Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today we're joined by Pandza. Carol is the SVP and CHRO at AmeriHealth Caritas. Welcome to the show. How are you, Carol?
I'm well. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Well, I'm glad we made this happen. And I'm going to say to everyone on the show who hasn't seen it visually, you've got the best setup so far. We're very impressed. You've definitely set the benchmark for the other guests. Carol, give our listeners a little bit about your background and your journey to where we are today.
Sure. It was a little bit circuitous. It wasn't a straight line, but there's a thread that runs through it. I started out in customer service in a area of a property casualty insurance company in operations, and eventually went to the claim department there. All roads led to things I like to do, which is kind of what happens for a lot of people. Anything that involved writing or working directly with people or customers, coaching, a lot of presenting, training, even one-on-one kind of sitting with small groups or one person. Eventually, I became a leader, a casualty unit manager, they called it. It was kind of a manager of claims adjusters. And I went and took a class in presenting training material. And at the end of the class, when we wrapped up, the person who was running the workshop said, "I think you should do this for a living." And I kind of have one of those moments where you think, I didn't even know this was something you could do for a living.
Yeah.
And so eventually, a company that I had worked for initially had a job open like that. And they called me and asked me if I'd be interested. I came back and took it. And then I posted into other roles, eventually left the claims training world for the human resources training world, got involved in OD work, on a merger integration team, got to do a lot of other things in human resources, got to do recruitment and performance management and associate relations. And so little by little, you start to do those things that you had not done before, and you start to like them. You start to develop a little bit of an expertise, and eventually that company, through the merger, I left that company and I worked for them as a consultant doing their performance management training for a year while the rest of the company moved to Boston from Philadelphia. So I did that consulting for 9 years. I'd love to tell you that I had a business plan, but I didn't. It was very organic. It just happened. Mm-hmm. I don't know how your business started, but sometimes that happens and then you have to do the plan after. Mm-hmm. And then what we did was I worked for a lot of different companies, and I thought, well, I'd like to go back in. I really did want to end my career as CHRO, but I wasn't sure if that would be possible, and there were still plenty of things to learn in the learning NOD world. So I came here and I started out as a consultant. AmeriHealth Caritas is where we are now. Thank you for pronouncing it correctly.
Just about.
That's right. You did well. And I'm here now, and I came in as an organizational development consultant, eventually became director, eventually became VP of learning and organizational development. And then there was an opening for CHRO, and they asked me to serve as interim. And after a little while, they promoted me into the role. So it was a very organic process. I can't say that I was, pining to do it at the moment that it was put in front of me, but luckily I had a good team that helped me make the leap.
It's funny because out of the 100 guests I've interviewed, I think maybe 2 or 3 planned to work in HR, right? Which is a big shock to me, if I'm honest. And many of them, like you, didn't even know what it was. So where we are now, Carol, what really occupies your mind on a day-to-day basis?
I think in my tenure here, I don't have the exact numbers, but when I came here, we had about 1,500 to 1,800 associates working for us. And now we have about 6,300 associates working for us.
Wow.
And that's a result of getting RFP awards and sometimes a little bit of organic growth. And we have really become a much bigger company. So I'm thinking about that all the time, because when you have a small company and you go to be a big company and it happens quickly, then you have to kind of reevaluate. Do we have the right processes? Are we using the right technology? Are we giving our people even the time and attention that they need to learn the new skills to do the next thing that they need to do? So that's really what's top of mind for me now. And that's exciting work too, because it kind of lends itself to the things that I like to do on process and writing and training, but not so much training as really working with other people who are doing that now, making sure that we're hitting the right stuff.
Well, let's face it, if you're working in HR and you don't like change and transformation, you're probably in the wrong job. You probably shouldn't be working in that. And I know a lot of people find that quite shocking. My wife's sister is studying HR at the moment as a master's degree. And when she listens to a few of the episodes and hear from people like yourself, it's a big shock to her at some of the huge change and transformation projects that the companies go through. It's like, this is not something we're being taught, Chris, at university. I was like, yeah, I'm not surprised whatsoever.
And I think I hear all the time from people, there are many certifications, as you know,
Yeah.
SHRM has them.
Yeah.
And when you go to take the test, the answer to the test, it's right, theoretically, but what you encounter in real life is so much more complex that sometimes the area you're in, that's your expertise, you don't do as well in as the other areas where you're answering right based on what you've studied. So it's a really interesting, it's an interesting field to be in. It's not a dull field.
No, and it's always changing, ever changing, to be honest. And we're seeing that with now the introduction of technology into, who would have thought we would be talking about prescriptive and predictive analytics within HR? I think that is a big shift for many organizations as well. So that leads us quite nicely on to the next question, where I was going to ask you, can you share more details around a current transformation or project that you're working on that you're most proud of or excited about as a business?
We're looking at ways we can examine our current workforce, look at what we need for the future, for training, things like that. But one of the things that I'm really proudest of at AmeriHealth Caritas is the diversity that we have. And if you don't mind, I have a little cheat sheet with me, because if I get these statistics wrong and my team sees it, they'll come back and come after me. But, we went to a more stringent benchmark about 2 years ago. And we have always had a very diverse workforce, and it's a big deal for us because we've been so successful, and we want to give that success back to the people who helped us do it. But we have, against a benchmark of other industries like ours with about 73% women, we're at 76.5. Females in management, the benchmark's 57, we're at 62. Female executives, the benchmark's 29, we're at 43. Ethnically diverse, the benchmark's 33, we're at 54. We know as we go through this that we need to come up with a stricter benchmark as we go forward, because we're trying to do even more innovative things. But that's something that I'm really proud of. And that's something that our CEO is really committed to as well. He's just signed onto a CEO compact for diversity and inclusion, and has communicated that to all associates as something that's really important. So, especially at this time, we want to make sure that everybody knows that's still our commitment.
Amazing. I think everyone listening is thinking, how? Can you share some of the things that you guys did? I think the first thing I sort of immediately heard was the fact that you have that buy-in and commitment from the CEO. Without that, nothing else works, right? So that was already great to hear you mention that. But can you share some of the things that you did with us that to achieve?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, first of all, when you're recruiting, you have to be looking for a diverse slate. We rely a lot on internal referrals. In fact, we would never have been able to do the growth things that we've been able to do without internal referrals. In 2017, we hired over 2,000 people, and we only have 6,300 people working here now. Wow. So that was an amazing thing that my team did with very little outside help. And my team doesn't do it alone. They do it with the help of the hiring managers. At the same time, we were able to maintain our benchmark for attrition at 12.58%. And so that was a great accomplishment, not to lose people as you were asking a lot of people and hiring a lot of new people. I think that that's something that draws people. The other thing is that, our members are a very diverse group of people. We are serving people in Medicaid. We have a variety of businesses, Medicare and behavioral health and other things as well. But we're serving people in Medicaid. And if people around the world don't know what Medicaid is, it's aimed at people who are in poverty. And so our member community is also a diverse community. And we're trying to reflect that as much as possible. So we have a lot of community outreach, a lot of job fairs. We have places where we will go in and find people who are on Medicaid who have skills, and we'll hire them and then bring them in to be on the workforce, which not only gives us a good employee and helps us with our diversity statistics, but also gets some people off the Medicaid rolls. So that's a win all over the place.
I suppose they can really also relate to the business and understand your why and your purpose.
Absolutely.
No, it's not something
everybody. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go carry on. Sorry.
Everybody has a personal story. So, everybody has something in their life where like, for example, for me this year, my mother's been ill, and we've done everything we could do for her at home. And finally, she developed enough of conditions that she needed to be in long-term care. Ultimately, you end up spending all your money down, and you need to look at Medicaid. And even though I thought I already knew a lot about it, boy, when you're up close and personal with what you have to encounter, you realize how difficult it is to navigate through some of the systems if you don't have the right kind of a company helping you or advocates helping you. At this company, we want to have those kind of advocates working for us. We want to be member-centric. We're really focusing on, when we hire, especially in a new market, what is it that they need, and how can we make sure we have people on the ground who can help them. And, I'm a person who has been lucky enough to have education, and I have experts all around me to ask, what about that person who doesn't have that? They don't have anybody to go to and ask those questions. If we don't provide that, then nobody gives it to them. So that's a big deal for us. The mission is really compelling.
I think it has to be as well. It's very important that you use that internal community to get referrals in, because that immediately creates that culture of when they come into the business, and that why and that sense of belonging and the purpose behind what they're doing and why they're there. I think that must do wonders for your culture. And
it does.
I can only imagine. And the purpose of when people get up in the morning, get out of bed and go to work, it's very clear why. Not many industries have that, whereas your own industry is very clear, and it's fantastic. Just out of curiosity, how did you prepare the organization in 2017 to bring on board such a huge number of staff? Because that must have been a bit of that must have been obviously a mammoth task. But I'm just wondering, internally, how did you prepare the business for that, to take on so many?
I'd love to tell you we did it perfectly, but I just don't think we did. I think we were able to win some RFPs, and we had to staff them quickly. We repurposed people in roles. We worked very closely with hiring managers. We increased the staff that we had in talent acquisition. We worked with people feet on the ground in those markets. We tried to hire people in the new markets who were at the top of the house, who could kind of bring in people that they knew from the local markets. We really had to marshal every resource from a human resources and hiring manager perspective. From a company perspective, I think the good news was that growth brings with it also profitability. And we are trying to make sure that every single associate here who comes and puts work in gets valued for that work. So we not only have what we think is very competitive pay, but we have an all-associate bonus that's on a sliding scale. So every associate gets something out of it when the company's successful. So that's a good way of bringing people along, because that's an incentive to help perform.
Yeah, everyone's working towards the same goal, right?
That's right.
I think that's extremely important. Even, one of my good friends is the sales director for Google, and that's also how they still operate to this day, that everyone succeeds together. I think it makes perfect sense to do that. So we've seen HR change dramatically, right, over the last 10, 15 years. And that seems to require a new set of skills within the HR team. So I'm wondering, what skills do you believe will be more important in HR in the future?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to do everything you can do to learn the business, because we don't want to be personnel paper pusher people who are just taking orders. We want to be strategic business partners. And I always feel successful that we are when people will call and say, well, I don't want to have this meeting without you, or I don't want to make this decision without you weighing in. That's a win when that happens. So I think the first thing I say to every single person, even entry-level people who come in and work for us in our, what we call our solution center, which is our call center, is learn as much as you can about the business. Even if you have to take a couple of minutes every day and look at our company website, you'll learn something new. You have to know that first. Critical thinking is important. I think that you really have to be able to be objective in almost every instance. We know that we're here to protect the company from risk. Sometimes that means that we have to advocate for the employee. Sometimes we're advocating for the manager. Sometimes we're trying to bring the two pieces together. But that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind, that we have to have, I think, courage in order to make sure that we can speak truth to power when it's necessary, and also that we are trying to make sure that everyone knows that we're working on their behalf because we want the company to be successful. I think for HR people too, we are going to have to really be more metric driven in the future. We're there to a certain extent, but there's more to know. We're going to have to learn more about artificial intelligence and how to use that. We're going to have better systems that give us real-time information. And we're going to have to provide that information to our partners so that they can make business decisions that are based on facts and data rather than just anecdotally. There's always an element of judgment, and I think judgment is important for HR people. I can't have anyone working in the HR area unless I'm clear that they have a real understanding of how important ethics and judgment are. And that goes from entry level.
You can't measure that, right? It's hard to measure that. You have to have the combination of both. It's very important to have that balance.
You do. And there's a difference between transparency and confidentiality. You should be as transparent as possible, as honest, as forthright as possible, but you have to maintain confidentiality for people. And so clarifying that and knowing how, when problems do emerge, you're going to handle them and what gets reported back. I mean, in HR, we can't always tell everyone at the end of a resolution what happened because you have to protect people's privacy.
Sure.
But you have to have a trust relationship so people know you're doing something, or else you won't succeed.
Mm-hmm. How have you managed your own personal development, Carol? Obviously with this new, if I told you 10 years ago that you're going to be talking about AI and HR and analytics, we would all said, no, what are you talking about, Chris? As well. How have you managed to keep up to date with current events and, took charge of your own personal development to make sure that you're always a step ahead and understand, the future?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you I'm always a step ahead, but I'm not always a step ahead. It does really help. Things like this help. And the CHRO conferences that I get invited to help because you're hearing people that have the same issues that you have. And so that's important. But what I'm finding is that the biggest struggle is that there's too much information coming in, not that there's not enough.
You're right.
And so I'm always looking at what is the business trying to do and what is it that I really need to prioritize. And then out of these 100 things that are coming at me every day, what are the 10 that I can really pull? And it's not always me. It's usually people who are on my team who are also fantastic, who I'm pulling in and saying, listen, let's leverage your expertise and get this done and give me feedback on whether this is going to work for us or not. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that the information age is full of information and some of it's helpful and some of it's not helpful.
It is quite overwhelming.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. So that's a piece for me, but I think you have to also read every day. I heard Warren Buffett say once that he read 500 pages a day. And I thought, well, you're beating me, but we're reading a lot every day and we're trying to stay up with not just current events because the external market is important, but also what are the biggest priorities for the company. So you got to know not just what the business is, but what the company strategy is, what you're trying to achieve overall, what the growth plan is. And then you can kind of look at what's being presented to you and all the asks that are being asked of you and figure out which ones you can really devote yourself to in order to make some change.
Mm-hmm. I think the good news is a lot of these skills already exist in your own business and a lot of this knowledge, and a lot of people sort of don't really take a look at that. If we talk about digital transformation, we've seen every department in an organization go through this. We've seen supply chain go through it. We've seen sales, we've seen marketing, we've seen all of the other functions go through it, and now it's HR's turn. Mm-hmm. I think what's great when I speak to other leaders in the analytics space, for example, Microsoft, for example, their global head of HR analytics was in their finance team, and they've been moved over, because if you look at your organization, those skill sets and that knowledge already exists in other departments, mm-hmm. and it really is transferable when you talk about digital transformation or AI and HR, etc. So I definitely encourage people to definitely look outside of their function and look in other parts of their business, and that skill already exists.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful to do things like rotations and incorporate it in talent management. Mm-hmm. I always want to be respectful to the people who are HR professionals who've chosen it for life. I mean, I came to it organically, as I mentioned, but I think there are people who are, stalwart, wonderful people who are there to provide commitment, but you can also get great ideas if you leverage your resources. And collaborating with people in IS is something that's happening every single day. Collaborating with people, because we are in healthcare at AmeriHealth Caritas, in our medical management function. What are the issues that the members have that our care managers are hearing? Are there things that we should be doing with hiring people that are, linked to that? Or the things that we should be doing with training people that are linked to that? So again, that business focus becomes more and more critical.
Hmm. How far are you guys in terms of your, we know that technology is such a huge part of this. How far along the journey do you feel you guys are in terms of adopting some of the new technologies and solutions into the organization, like a Workday, for example, etc.? Is that something that you guys are very heavily focused on?
No, we're not using Workday. We use PeopleSoft for our HR system.
Sure.
We are trying to use more functionality within it.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to better ways of managing people's time. We're switching over to a new time system. Gosh, it's going to be like next month now. I'm thinking that's the end of the summer, but that's next month, right? So that's happening. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to do some things like that provide greater flexibility. The workforce has changed so much. Much of the work that we do is out in the field, meeting with members. And so you have to find ways still to be tracking and paying people properly. You want to also maintain communication. Not all managers are good at communicating with people who are working at a distance. You have to kind of work with them to give them skills to do that. Some people have both, and then that becomes harder for them to manage the people who are right in front of them mm-hmm. and not forget the people who are at a distance. So there's a lot of that kind of work that's going on. But I have to be honest that from a technology perspective, that's something that's our big focus in our HR strategy. We need to do more with that. We need to even figure out what the most important things are to do first. We're really trying to provide good metrics to the people who are in the business so that they can make good business decisions. We can advise them, but we are limited if we don't have really good information.
You're right.
That's what we're looking for now.
Yeah, having the technology is one thing. Having the right data going into it is a whole other story. And I think that's right. The important thing. And you can get carried away with these things. There's so much functionality, new shiny objects that you can do. But it's very important, like you said, to work with the business, understand what the needs are of the organization, then work back and say, how can we help those? How can we help them make better decisions? So yeah, definitely seems like you're approaching it from the right perspective as well.
You.
What have you found to be the most effective way? I think a key to any CHRO success is really building those relationships and communicating with this leadership team in the organization. So yeah. What are some of the effective ways that you communicate with the team, and what advice could you give to other leaders that are going to be in that position very soon?
Well, I think I am a big fan of having a personal relationship with each person that you can, especially on that senior leadership team. Everybody's different, but there are some CHROs who will disagree with me and who say that you have to have a certain level of a disconnection, that you don't want to be too close. But I feel like it's very important to have a personal relationship with the person, and also clear boundaries around what it is that you can share, what it is that you can do, and what it is that you can't. And I actually think that enhances the relationship. I think once you are interacting with the people on your senior team or anywhere, and they know that they can't compromise you, that if they make a mistake and ask you for something that you can't reveal, that you're not going to do it, then that builds the trust, because they know that you're not going to do it when it's them, that it's their information on the line either.
Sure.
And so I feel really good about the relationship that we've been able to build with our partners. I feel great about the fact that we get invited to things and that people will say, no, I have to have this person here in order to succeed. And I'm really proud of the fact that on the transformation work, there's a human resources business partner on every work stream that we're working on. And we have talent management consultants serving on every work stream, so that we're looking long-term, not just at change management, but also at what we're going to need to do for talent management. I don't think that would have happened if people had not thought that there was value added by that.
And this is not a quick process, right? This is, and that's another thing people have to realize. I think many successful leaders that I speak to, they spend maybe the first year or two just building those relationships in the organization before they go ahead and make any change or big transformation or put together big projects. Because if you don't have the buy-in and the trust of that leadership team, then you'll fail very quickly in organizations. Do you agree?
And you have to make time to meet those people. We're across the country, so not everybody is local to Philadelphia where I am. And I do go out and see people, but when you're busy, you don't get to go out as much as you'd like to do. So I do have a regular one-on-one meeting with most of the leaders, with all of the market presidents that we're checking in every 3-4 months. Are they getting the support that they need? What are the issues that they're struggling with? And then we circulate that so that we can give them the help they need. Sometimes that's not HR help. Sometimes that's just giving somebody else a heads up that they need, on what they need. And I think that connection becomes really important. I never want to hear that whisper down the lane that there's an issue. I want people to know that I'm going to be open to hearing what the issues are, so that then we can follow up and fix them. People will say things anecdotally, and both HR and IS, they're easy to kick when something's not going well. But I think that often it's a more complex issue than that. And if they know that you're willing to hear it and help them solve, they'll come to you.
Yeah, and they have to feel comfortable to do so in the first place. That's right. Why it's important that you have those. I do feel like sometimes technology just gets in the way of that, because we end up resorting to a video call or a phone call, but you don't really build those meaningful relationships in that way. I do feel like you need to get out of the office and go and actually meet these guys, and every single conversation is going to be different. Everyone's needs and challenges and motivations are going to be different as well. So unless you understand that, then it's not really going to work too well as well. Mm-hmm. So obviously you're going through quite a big change right now in your organization. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for improvement in the business?
Well, I think that we do have big opportunities around technology, as we've talked about, and that's happening already. I think that we have a lot of opportunity around process, because again, when you have organic growth and it happens so quickly, like I said, 2,000 people and there's only 6,300 total, you have work to do on that. Mm-hmm. But I also think that we want to maintain the connection to the people. So that might be the biggest challenge, is maintaining engagement through that. We have, because of our mission of serving the poorest of the poor, the sickest of the sick, helping people get well and build healthy communities, we have people who really are devoted to that. And that helps us with engagement. That's consistently been our highest engagement score. But when there's a lot of change, we want to get in there and manage that change. We want to let people know that we are validating how they're feeling. We want to answer their questions. And so that becomes a really important thing too. And if you don't mind me kind of meandering off a little bit about technology, I do have a pet peeve on technology that I'll share with you. So,
what HR leader doesn't?
So it's that we're using it, it's using us instead of us using it. That's what's happening. And, I'm old enough to have worked a long enough time that there was a time we did not have technology, and I could not do my job without it. I love it. My family would tell you I'm probably on it too much, but we are not doing the knowledge transfer and the training and the preparing the leaders of the future, because we are taking every call while we are sitting in the sand on the beach with our feet in the water, and we're making every decision. And I see that happening a lot. And it's not just here. It's at my colleagues say that it's happening for them. And I think there's a feeling that because you can be connected, you must be connected. But that's anti-development. We are not giving people the development they need to make those next steps. We're not even giving them a safe place to kind of make mistakes while they learn. And I think we could do better with that and identify, I'm calling it kind of thoughtful disconnection. Yeah. When can you afford to be disconnected and you have done what you need to do to prepare the people who are left behind to do that work? Because if it's a real emergency, these jobs, you must be on call. It comes with the territory. There's no complaint about that. But people have started to not be able to discern what is a real emergency that needs to make a call and what is something that they are empowered to actually do on their own. And I think as leaders, we could do a better job with that.
Yeah. What do you feel that the consequences are going to be then if we continue to operate this way?
I think what happens is, first of all, I think that there's a disengagement from the associate who doesn't feel that they have a path forward. I think sometimes, even if there is a path forward to them, they're not really prepared for it when it comes to them. And I think also we could exhaust people. We could exhaust the people that we're calling, and we could exhaust people who are doing the calling, who are feeling like they don't know what next step to take unless they have to get somebody to weigh in on it.
Have you taken any steps now to address that?
I don't like to be parental kind of a manager, so I like to be a more collaborative kind of a manager. So I don't want to tell people don't check your email, but I want to say, have you done what you need to do to prepare who your backup is? I'm always asking, who is your backup? When I am not here, I have a backup. I am saying, okay, if you want me to respond to something that's very important in email, put in the email subject line, please respond. You have my personal cell phone number, so if you need me in an emergent situation, you can always get me. But I'm going to trust that you're aware enough of this information, that I've given you enough training, empowerment, whatever it is that you need, so that you can make these decisions in my absence. And all I'm asking you to do is let me know where we are when I come back. If you don't model that, you're not going to get it.
I think that's a good question that you said, by the way. As soon as you asked that, I was asking myself that question. I was thinking, who is mine, right? If I'm not here. And that is quite concerning because I couldn't answer that very quickly in my own head of exactly what that would be. I think that's extremely important. So
yeah, because we're creating single points of failure.
Yeah.
I used to say, what if somebody gets hit by a bus? And then someone pointed out to me that that's negative, and I should say, what if someone wins the lottery? So now I've changed it to what if someone wins the lottery?
It's not something that I thought about, so thanks for bringing it up. It's something that I'm going to have to think about personally now as well. Well, look,
next time it'll be a different face, right? It won't be you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that leads us quite nicely on to the quick fire round, where I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers.
My goodness. Okay.
No pressure.
Okay.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior HR leader?
I don't think I was feeling held back. I think that I wanted it, and I was doing all kinds of good work that I thought put me in the right stead for it. I wasn't at a place where I felt like I need to quit and go away. There were still challenges within the job. And I liked the people that I worked for. I worked for several different CHROs, and they were all good people, and they all gave me enough exposure and ability to work on my own that I felt happy about that. So I don't think I really felt held back, but I would say that if you do feel held back, it's usually you who's holding you back.
That's normally the response everyone says. It's normally yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And just no one's going to give you permission. You kind of have to take it for yourself. What's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
I was thinking about this. I'm not sure this is going to fit into your business advice category, but I have a personal anecdote I'll share real quickly because I have 30 seconds. It's that when I was a young mother a long time ago and working my consulting business and feeling very pushed to do everything, I went to my mother-in-law's house for a pre-holiday celebration, and she was not, she was working a part-time job. She's an amazing entertainer, and everything was perfection 2 weeks before the holiday, the meal, the ambiance, everything. And I was sitting next to a friend of hers, and I just kind of took a sigh and said, I just can't do what she does. And the friend said, she can't do what you do either, honey. And it kind of cleared the day for me. I thought, you know what? I'm not competing with her. I'm going to compliment her for this. I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to be grateful that I have this lovely experience here. And I'm going to make this a great night. And, it changed my relationship with my mother-in-law. Not that it was bad, but it just made it, she felt so much more appreciated. And it was a lesson that I was able to bring to work because, on my direct report team and beyond, I have amazing people who are extremely talented and skilled and self-aware and also composed and able to not put their own personal feelings in difficult conversations. And if I were competing with that, I'd be running around losing all the time. But if you can accept and appreciate and empower and give feedback, you're winning. And so that's where my success has come from.
I'm glad that you said that now. That's very insightful and very powerful. I think if people took that approach it's quite hard to be self-aware though enough to be able to separate and look at that objectively as well. So it's great that you had the ability to do that. I'm
thanking her too, because she was a friend of my mother-in-law's and she kind of could see what was happening. And she was just that little thing sticks with me all the time. I think of it all the time. And I've even told her and her daughter how much it meant to me. And she was like, wow, I only have a vague recollection of saying it. So,
But sometimes it's those moments, right?
Yes.
Really, that you remember. So thanks for sharing that. What's one book, or more than one, because there's always normally more than one that people want to recommend to our audience, and why? It doesn't have to be HR related, by the way.
So Little Women. No, I'm kidding. I did like Little Women, but really I think there's one book that I go back to all the time, and it's Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. It's not a new book, but he really, for the first time, he wrote this book that brought into kind of a gut check that I had, something that he made it real. And he said, smart is important, but there's all different kinds of smart. and you have to be able to navigate emotionally in order to be able to solve. And the most successful people are not necessarily people with the highest IQ. They're people that have some combination of intelligence and emotional intelligence. And there's a lot in there about authenticity and also personal discipline. That's important. And that's also reflected in a book called The Power of Habit. Since you told me I could say two, The Power of Habit is another one. But I would say if I had to refer people to one book, and as you know, there's a lot of books and some of them are great and some of them are just not. And I think that you have to really pick the ones that are meaningful and kind of keep referring back to them. And he's written a bunch of different books since then about emotional intelligence with different groups of people. But there's a lot about intelligence that has to do with being able to see another person's point of view.
Fantastic. Well, I'll certainly link those in the description for everyone so they can get hold of those. Could you share one internet resource that you use to keep up to date with current events or connect with your peers?
I was thinking about this. I look at CNN every day, and I'm looking at the news, and I look at the Philadelphia news online every day, although I like the actual paper on the weekends when I can kick back and have coffee. But to use like as a resource for being more productive, I really like the notes feature. Mm-hmm. I've been using that, and I think there's a couple of, this is going to be a little touchy-feely, but there's a couple of mindfulness memos that I get every day that remind you to kind of breathe and be present and interact with the people. And I use that because, there's a lot expected of these jobs, as it should be. And I can be task focused, and you don't want to just be task focused and be walking by not noticing that there's some care needed for a person. So those are the ones that I use the most.
Yeah, but again, it works for you, right? And that's what's important. And this question is always different to everyone. For me, it's podcasts because it fits my lifestyle and I'm always on the move, but I want to consume content whilst I'm moving. It just kind of works with me. And that's what works for you too, right? So
yeah, I do podcasts all the way home every night, but I do Motown all the way in every morning. Nice. So you need a little energy in the morning. So
love it. Yeah. And I think more and more now we're consuming content that fits within our lifestyle. So depending on what our lifestyle is, depends on what type of content, whether it's audio, video or reading. So seeing that big change from how you, I'm also seeing that of the employees as well. And I'm sure you're seeing it in terms of how your employees learn and develop. Some prefer watching a video, some prefer reading it, right? It really depends now. It's very interesting. What's one thing around your business that you're most excited about today?
Because healthcare is so critical, AmeriHealth Caritas is a healthcare company, and we're hearing about healthcare every day in the news. Even when we look at BBC America, I'm sure you're hearing about the American healthcare system. Yep. And we are really at a place where we want to make sure that we are taking care of the people that need to be taken care of. And so that's really making sure that we can continue to grow and that we can continue to serve the members better is the thing that's top of mind.
It's such an important why and the purpose of what you guys do. So it must be very exciting to get up in the morning and go to work every day. Well, look, Carol, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the show. I'm really glad we made this happen. You've definitely given us some actual advice and guidance, so our listeners will be a lot better off for it. So really appreciate it.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.